Welcome in here on Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are back for an episode of Three True Values Big Board, where we are going to break down the NBA draft from the college side of things. Yes, here in this first segment, I want to go through some of my sleepers, the players that I'm very fascinated by, that I'm really interested in tracking we continue to move towards the end of the college basketball regular season. We've got about a month left to go, and then we get to see how these players perform in the postseason. And of course, from there, many of these will have a decision to make whether they want to return for another season or enter their name into the NBA draft. We also, in this show, are going to talk in the second segment just briefly about the NBA's tanking problem. We're going to talk about what they can or cannot really do to fix things as we see a race towards the bottom in this highly anticipated draft class. Is it really an issue, or is it something that's just kind of part of the game, part of the system? We're going to break that down in the second segment. But as we go ahead and get into things today, I do want to talk about some of the players that I'm very high on, perhaps higher than the consensus at this point, but who are still working their way up the board, who may or may not end up with first round grades, but at this point are widely still considered second round players with a lot of potential to move up. And so we're going to go kind of by position here as we roll through some of the names that are most interesting, that stand out quite a bit. And at the point guard spot, if we're going to start there, really Milos Uzan is one that fascinates me. Last year, of course, came on really strong for Houston down the stretch. Seemed like a guy who was primed for a breakout, leads Houston deep into that NCAA tournament, had really come on as a point guard, as a guy who could run that team. Now, entering this year, I think that the main kind of goal was to follow up what he had done the year before. That got sidetracked, though. Kingston Flemings comes in even better than anticipated in his freshman season, number one among NBA draft point guards right now for me on my board. So, what does that mean for Uzan? Well, it meant that he had to play off the ball quite a bit, much more than he would have thought when he decided to forego the NBA draft and return to college basketball this season. But he also did not throw a fit. He did not transfer out. He did not, make any demands. He went with the flow of things. He said, okay, if I'm not going to be the primary ball handler for the majority of the game, where can I improve my game off the ball? How can I add value in other ways? And it's still a work in progress in some ways, but I think that it does add some overall value to his game. He is a big guard. He's not one of these smaller guards that we have concerns about. That's going to give him a boost just right off the bat, particularly when it comes to being a backup point guard who is trying to create value by playing on and off the ball at times. Because if he's able to use these off ball minutes effectively, efficiently, find ways to continue to improve as a perimeter shooter, particularly on the catch and shoot, which was not something that he thought he would be working on within his game. If he can continue to get downhill, whether it's catching it and going quickly or organizing the offense and getting paint touches, if he can continue to build on everything that he has created as a foundation and everything that he has worked on to this point in the season, also maintain the defensive energy that really this entire Houston team has displayed, I see no reason that he can't maintain his draft stock where it was last season, which was high second round value. He's a guy who, as a backup guard, which is what he projects to be, does create more opportunity for himself when he can play alongside another ball handler. You see teams that have a star point guard, that point guard is going to be out there for a majority of the game. So if you're the backup and you want to create big minutes for yourself, you have to be able to find synergy and match up and complement what that star is doing. His defense helps him do that. The experience playing off the ball next to Flemings is going to help him do that. Really think that it creates a lot of versatility, a lot of value that teams are going to notice. So he's a guy who, watch for him. If he has a big postseason run, if he really gets hot down the stretch of this regular season, I could see him raising up into this first round conversation. Now, somebody who is very different as a player, Tyler Tanner from Vanderbilt, just small. I mean, he is electric. The speed is everything you want. The defense, the hands that he has on that end of the floor, it's all what you want out of a point guard, but he's just very small. And in the NBA, we are seeing less and less small guards find success. It's just a trend that has continued to go downhill over these last couple of years, has really hit an absolute wall over the past 12 months or so. You look at small guards, even 6'3" and below. There's just not a lot of value out there for those guys. So for Tyler Tanner, it's going to be interesting. I understand that talent wise, if you're evaluating what he's done on film, it's easy to continue to move him up and up the draft board. I just think there is an artificial cap created on the value that NBA teams are going to see from him given his size. It's unfortunate for him. It doesn't mean that he can't prove it or overachieve once he gets to the NBA. That's certainly an opportunity that he will have. I do believe that someone is going to give him a chance somewhere in the second round when he does enter the NBA draft. Another interesting part of this for him, he's got more college eligibility. Knowing that you're going to likely be capped in the second round, do you return? Do you enter the transfer portal? Where is your best money-making opportunity in addition to where can you play the best basketball? That's going to be something for him to evaluate over these next few months. Jaden Bradley has done wonders for his draft stock by leading that Arizona team, really being an organizer for a team that until last night was undefeated. Number one in the country to this point, still holds on to the number one overall seed in bracketology right now. So he has really blossomed and continued to grow. Just a solid organizing point guard. Tamin Lipsey at Iowa State, another really, really fascinating one. One of the best perimeter defenders in college basketball. But again, he's not super big and he doesn't bring a ton of offensive value. That's what's going to be very fascinating about him. He feels like a limited minutes backup guard is probably where he winds up, probably on a two-way contract somewhere to start his career, and then proving himself, using that as a chance to showcase his defensive prowess against other players. That's where I see him getting an opportunity to really break free. As we move into the shooting guards, I'm still very interested in Dash Daniels. I know that it's been up and down season overseas. We know, of course, that he has the measurables. His family, we've seen with Dyson Daniels currently in the NBA. The three-point shooting has been up and down, but the steals are electric. Dash has a lot of the same measurements, a lot of the same kind of instincts that you see on tape, and you're wondering how it's going to come together. But it just hasn't fully featured itself in the NBL to this point. Going to be really interesting to see, can he get hot down the stretch? Does he look much better in workouts? How does that impact his draft stock as he has kind of slipped down into the second round conversation? But somebody who's still worth keeping an eye on, who I don't think you should sell your stock on just yet. Dalen Swain at Texas. Man, this is a fascinating player because he is absolutely torching teams right now. He has almost carried Texas into the bubble conversation nearly on his own. He is the force that makes that Texas offense go, gets downhill. He has not shot the ball extremely well from a percentage standpoint from deep, but he has been able to get to his spots and just be a volume scorer. Now, that's the interesting part with him. Does his stock go up into the first round based on volume scoring? Because how many teams from 20 on down in this NBA draft are going to be looking for someone who's taking that volume of shots? Can he scale it? That's going to be a question that is up to teams to answer, because obviously with this Texas team, they're not going to see that on a nightly basis. They're not going to see how does he look when he only gets 5, 6, 7 shots versus 14, 15 shots in any given game. That's part of the draft evaluation process. That's part of what makes it so difficult to pin down these guys, particularly in the second round, who are going to be able to succeed at the next level. Ryan Conwell, another one. His stock just keeps sliding up over and over again. He has been a force for this Louisville team, keeps putting up big performances. He's got the size as a shooting guard. He kind of fills the rotational need that you're looking for. It's going to be interesting to see how high does his stock go. I think he's a guy who could definitely burst into the first round as teams continue to look for complementary pieces, because he's a guy who has not been the go-to force. Now, he has been their most consistent force and probably their best scoring option, but he doesn't dominate the ball. He isn't taking up just a massive percentage of the shots on the court. He has played within that Louisville offense still. So really interested to see what that does for his stock. And Justin Pippen, another one, his of obviously father Scotty, his brother Scotty Jr. in the NBA right now. Justin, a little bit different of a player. He's a little bit bigger than his brother. He's shown some of the same traits, though: the ability to be disruptive on defense, the ability to put up buckets on the offensive end. A player worth tracking as we go down the rest of this season as he continues to grow at Cal. Not sure if he's a guy who ends up in this draft class either, as we talked about with some of the point guards. The opportunity to come back to college to decide where the most money is, the best opportunity on the basketball court is for you, is going to be fascinating to follow. At the small forward position, though, we've got some interesting stuff to break down here, because the small forward position is really kind of picked thin as we look at the top of the second round. I don't see a ton of names out there. There's Juke Harris, who we've talked about some, Otega Oweh at Kentucky, who we know about, but then it really does tail off in a big way. But I think at the bottom of the second round is where there's some interesting stuff to evaluate. Nick Martinelli at Northwestern. We saw Brooks Barnhizer get drafted now in the G League on a two-way contract with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now his teammate from Northwestern, a just grind it out, get buckets, figure it out type of player. He's not going to check all of the boxes, but the production speaks for itself. The work ethic speaks for itself. You see him out there just find a way to get it done when he's dealing with bigger, faster, stronger opponents than him, whether he's having to handle the ball some, whether he's having to play more of a big role against certain teams. He just is up for the challenge, and I think he's going to be an interesting prospect to try to pin down in that late second round conversation. Braden Frager, another one. I would say he's most likely to return to college, probably another year or two before he's truly ready for the NBA draft conversation. But really fascinating as a freshman with some really good size at the small forward spot for Nebraska, a team that has overachieved what anyone thought they were going to do. When you see a team do that, you've got to look up and down their roster and figure out who is overachieving that is allowing them as a team to exceed expectations. Braden Frager is right up there among the top candidates in that conversation, because efficient three-point shooting obviously has held up out there as a small forward. That size is something that you really are looking for at that position, particularly in this class where, like I said, it gets thin at that small forward spot. So interested to see him down the stretch, but I do ultimately think he's probably a year or two away from the NBA draft conversation, really ramping up on him. The power forwards are very fascinating. And I want to talk just briefly about Amari Allen at Alabama. I have him in the first round conversation now, but he seems to be someone who is all over the board for people who are evaluating this NBA draft class. Some have fully bought into a 6'8" good athlete, can play the 3 and the 4, it appears, can really toggle between, rebounds the ball very well, appears to be able to defend on the perimeter and do a little bit on the interior as well. He just adds so much versatility. The three-point shooting has looked good to this point, but he's a really, really fascinating player to try to pin down what exactly his role is at the next level? Is it that just versatile, come in, fill whatever hole in our lineup we need for those, 5 to 6 minutes at a time, adds you up. You've played 18 minutes tonight, 24 minutes tonight, whatever the case is. That feels like a good starting point, but I'm interested in the ceiling of Amari Allen as well. What can he become with the combination of skills that he brings? I look at a Kyle Kuzma, who obviously is on a negative contract right now, but brings positive value and throughout the course of his career, at least, has brought some really good traits to teams that have needed it at different times. Another player in this second round conversation who is really fascinating to try to pin down what he will become is JoJo Tugler from Houston. Maybe the best all around defender in recent memory that I have watched. He will guard AJ DeBonsa on the perimeter. He will, on that same possession, block a shot from a former G League center at the rim. That's what JoJo Tugler is. It is pure energy. It is pure chaos. He has excellent positioning, his movement laterally, the explosion as an athlete. He has everything you need as a defender to create steals, to create blocks. He is strong. He is not the tallest at this power forward position, but like I said, that athleticism, that burst that he brings, he is an elite defender. The questions come on offense where he does not provide you really anything. Maybe he can catch a couple of lobs. That's about all he has shown to this point in his game offensively. So how valuable can that defense be? Does a team feel like they can teach him something on offense? How many minutes can you leave him out there on an NBA floor if teams choose to just not guard him at all? Because one of the great ideas behind JoJo Tugler and his defense is that you would be able to then hide your star player, allow them to rest on defense while he takes the toughest assignments. How well does that work if they're then having to work extra on the offensive end as the defense attempts to double them, attempts to shade towards them, create their life harder on that end of the floor? That's what's going to have to be sorted out by some of these teams as they debate his true value to their team. Baba Miller, another one. I still list him as a power forward. I've seen him listed as a center more recently, and I think that's a fascinating kind of shift. Obviously, he's always been a very tall forward, has struggled to kind of find his rhythm to really become the player that we all thought was just a prototype first round draft pick years ago when he entered the college game. But he starts to look the part now at Cincinnati. He feels like he's gotten the rebound element of his game figured out to a much higher degree. Very interested in the value that creates for him. We obviously know that he's got the base skills. It just hasn't really translated into big production still at this point in his career, which is why I'm hesitant to move him into the first round conversation. But I think he is one of these, great flyers that we see taken in the second round, a guy who's just got immense talent. Can we get him in the room? Can we get it figured out? Sort out what it is that he needs to be doing on the court and get him bought into that type of performance. It's going to be really interesting to follow. I think Baba Miller is such a just prototype. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Long wingspan, great height, good athleticism, fluidity on the outside, but it just hasn't come together with an outside shot, with downhill driving. We haven't seen all of those elements added to his game. The stocks have not just skyrocketed throughout his college career, but there's a lot to like and a lot left in his development. JT Toppin, kind of the opposite. We know exactly what JT Toppin is at Texas Tech. Will he leave for the NBA draft this time around? That's to be determined. Milan Momcilovic at Iowa State, shooting above 50% from the three-point line and really making his NBA draft case an interesting one, because if you look at that lineup, we talk about Tamin Lipsey as an elite defender, Killian Torrey as a high-level defender, Joshua Jefferson as another one of these, might be the best overall defender in college basketball in that conversation at least. And then they've got an anchor at the center position. But then there's Momcilovic, who is viewed as a negative on defense, but because he's been surrounded by so many great defenders, has really been hidden on that end. And it makes it interesting trying to evaluate him. You cannot just go off the analytics because the analytics will tell you that he's a really solid defender because of how good everyone around him is. Now, can he be a decent team defender? That's the question. And I think that's something that's going to be a unique challenge as teams do evaluate him. Is he a good team defender, or is everyone else so good on defense around him that it doesn't matter what he does? Does he sometimes take off on defense knowing that it doesn't matter what he does? There's all kinds of things to sort through here as you try to evaluate his game. But the one thing that he does bring is elite 3-point shooting. I mean, he is a sniper from behind the arc, and it's going to be interesting to see. Somebody is definitely going to take that opportunity with him. Allen Graves, another interesting one to track here as we wrap up the power forwards. This is a loaded position. We talked about how light the small forward position is. There are a ton of power forwards that we could just keep talking about here. Donnie Freeman is so fascinating at Syracuse. Morris Johnson, who I've kind of left out of this because I have him on the border of the first round conversation. Even Kwame Evans finally having the breakout year after I kind of started to maybe not give up, but stop believing that he was going to become the incredible defensive prospect that we knew that he could be in his first few seasons at Oregon. Even down the list, David Mirkovic, another really fascinating one. But Cannon Catchings as well should not leave him out at Georgia. But I do want to finish here talking just a little bit about Allen Graves at Santa Clara. He has picked up a lot of attention for his analytic numbers, for the metrics that he brings on both ends of the floor. Very efficient player. He looks the part of an NBA player. I'll tell you that. I'm not quite sure that it's going to be this year, if for no other reason for him than that the opportunity appears to be so much greater in the 27 draft. First of all, you get a chance to round out your game. You get a chance to continue building your base because he's not an every game starter as a freshman at Santa Clara. Yes, he is doing great things for a freshman who's coming from completely off the radar at Santa Clara. And I think that's part of the hype, is that there is so much clear growth from him this season. But imagine that growth continuing over another season into a weaker draft class. We could easily be talking about a guy who goes all the way up into the first round. Potentially, if he is able to put together these efficient performances at an even higher clip with more usage rate, getting into a little bit better shape so that he can play even more minutes on both ends of the floor, I think that's when you start to talk about the possibility of being a top 20 pick, potentially getting up into the lottery. In what is considered a weaker draft class, that is probably the best opportunity that he has going forward. Obviously, that does make you health dependent. It does, of course, make you dependent to some degree on your team's continued success, unless, of course, you do opt to enter the transfer portal, go to the place that will combine the opportunity to make the most money with the opportunity to create the most growth for yourself. A lot of options are going to be on the table for him as he looks towards next season. So I'm really interested to follow him, what he does. I do think he's more of a 27, maybe even 28 draft prospect, but I think that those classes might give him an even better opportunity to rise and get the best value. At the center position, we've got some interesting things to follow. Alex Connon has had an up and down year at Florida. Still worth following. He's still a really good facilitator from the top of the key, sets very solid screens. The ability to get the ball in the hole is something that he's just got to sort out. Has not happened this year. Looked much better last year, so interested to see down the stretch, can he figure things out a little bit better. His teammate, though, Ruben Chinyelu. I don't know if anyone has risen up the board more for me than Ruben Chinyelu. I do think that there is somewhat of a cap on how high he can go on the board given his his lack of top end center height. He is still a smaller big who is going to rebound the ball really hard, doesn't provide you a ton on offense. Yes, he's shown the ability to take one dribble and get to the rim a couple of times for Florida this season, but I'm not sure how much a part of his game that's going to be against bigger, faster, stronger defenders in the NBA, even with increased spacing. I just don't know if he's going to add that element in a serious way. But what he does bring is pure, unbridled intensity. He is a guy who he crashes the boards. Uh, Multiple games this season where he has approached 20 rebounds and just is attacking the glass, going up above defenders, above uh, the guards that are around him, boxing out extremely well, creating space, finding the angles, everything you want a player to do. And then he brings the defensive element too. He moves his feet very well for a center. He is not going to stay out in front of a guard on an island by any means, but he is able to shift across to deal with switches and keep teams from just getting free runs at the rim. He does very well in that aspect of his game, and so I'm really interested to see how high can his stock really go as he really works on becoming efficient on putbacks, becoming efficient on these dump downs and on the lobs. How much value is there in his game? I think that it could end up being pretty high. Malachi Moreno, a guy who has continued to see his stock rise. I'm another guy that I'm really interested in what he decides to do, because next year's draft class, it's a down year from all of the evaluations that we talk about. So some of these players that we're discussing, particularly the ones who currently have a second round grade, are going to look at this and say, not only is NIL a part of college basketball, that probably gives me the best earning potential for next season. Paired with that, I've got the opportunity to raise my draft stock if for no other reason than I'm not sorted behind this long list of incredible players who are in the 26 draft class. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. I think that Malachi Moreno is an ideal candidate for that. Really strong rebounder, a guy who, if he continues to round out his offensive game, could see a big spike in his stock as well. Zuby Ejiofor at St. John's, we know how he has continued to rise. Vesar as well. I thought he had a really big performance against Duke. I think that kind of offset any damage that was done to his stock in the Virginia game, where he very, very much struggled down the stretch. Terrace Reed, another interesting one, but I want to talk about Motias Krivas, who has been excellent defensively for Arizona. You see why they allowed Henry Vesar to go to North Carolina in order to clear the space for Krivas. Just really good rim protection, his ability to create blocks. He is the stifling big center that you want on the interior to be able to just deter rim shots and make it very difficult for teams to get all the way to the rim on their drives. He has been really, really high level. Obviously, the rest of that defense allows him some of that freedom, but he's a guy who could easily slot in behind a starting center in the NBA and create some real value for himself as a guy who comes in and is just there to be a stopper. You know, keep the other team from just running at the rim while the backup center is in. He could definitely fill that role. And there's a little bit more to his game too. He can create a little bit. He can rebound more to round out. He obviously missed a big chunk of last season with an injury after creating some hype for himself that he might be a draftable player in the 25 class. Now in 26, I think he's definitely a guy to watch in the draft and could continue to see his stock raise as Arizona's games become more and more high profile down the stretch. They are still one of the best teams in college basketball despite their loss on Monday night. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk a little bit about the NBA's tanking problem. Can they fix it? Is there an easy solution? Right here on 3 True Values Big Board. Again, here as we wrap up today's show on Three True Values Big Board, we're talking about the NBA and its tanking problem. Yes, this is a college basketball show for the most part, but we do talk about the NBA draft, and so NBA's tanking dilemma has created an interesting conversation around the prospects that are at the top of this class. Yes, it is a loaded group of players. So if you can best position yourself for a Darren Peterson, for an AJ DeBonsa, for even the Cameron Boozers, Caleb Wilsons, Kingston Flemings, Keaton Wagglers, we go on and on down the line. If you can get one of those players, it could change your franchise. So it makes sense, particularly if you are going the opposite way, if your team is aging, if you're clearly out of the playoff picture at this point, whatever the case is, it makes sense to try to get the best odds at improving next season that you can. However, it does create issues on the court for both the players and for the fans who are in attendance, who are watching across the globe. It's a very unique issue and one that has a lot of moving parts. And so I don't necessarily have a go-to solution. But I do just want to address a couple of the theories that are out there about how to fix this. The first one that I've heard that's pretty extreme is to have the odds be equally weighted across all 30 teams, or even 22 teams, so that the teams that, of course, advance in the playoffs are not included. I've seen also even odds just across the teams that miss the playoffs. I've seen all of it. And why I think that it kind of fails to hit the mark is that this league is ultimately built on parity. That is the goal. When we got away from parity for a few years, fans resented it. When it became the Cavaliers versus the Warriors every year in the finals, that's not what fans wanted. The idea, if you're a fan of a team that does not have a star player, that does not have much of a future that you can just easily look out and touch, reach out and grab. The idea that you are sold from your front office, from the organization as a whole, of why you should come to games, of why you should support the team, of why you should still tune in, is hope. Now, how do you provide hope throughout the course of a season if you're told once you are no longer part of the playoff picture, it's just over? You're literally playing for nothing. You can't even improve your chances of getting better. It's just, it is what it is. And you know how early in the season that happens for a lot of teams? Not because they're tanking early in the season, but because they just don't have good enough players. Look at the Sacramento Kings right now. Look at the New Orleans Pelicans right now. Those are not teams that are attempting to lose. But under a model like that, they would have no incentive to even tune in on TV dating back to December. They were already out of the playoff conversation. So if you think it's bad that teams are tanking in February and the lack of attempt at winning a basketball game is bad for fans, bad for support, which it is. Well, imagine how bad it is if in December your fans understand that nothing matters. It can't get any better. It can't get any worse. We're going to go out there. Sure, we might try to win, but don't get excited about it because there's no hope. We didn't just get closer to getting the number one pick. We didn't just get closer to the playoffs. We just played a basketball game. I think that's a really hard sell. So then you look at other models that have been proposed. One of which, that I'll admit was interesting and I've looked deeper into, is that at a certain point on the calendar, perhaps after the trade deadline, we reward teams for wins instead of losses. And I think that that one is extremely flawed in two ways. The first one being that what we're going to see is teams try to lose games earlier and earlier in the season. Because if you are a team like the Wizards entering this season, understanding that we do not have the bodies to win basketball games. You're not going to go out there and attempt to win the first 20, 30, 40 games of the season because you understand that once that clock flips, once you are rewarded for the wins, you have no chance. So you better get as many losses as you can during that portion. You better create an advantage for yourself by losing more. That is the opposite effect of what they're looking to do in the NBA. You're also going to see the other issue is teams like what the Wizards have done this year, like what the Jazz have done this year, but not the way that they're doing it. Both of these teams are attempting to be decent next year. That's the goal. But imagine a team goes out, loses through the first stretch of the season. They want the best shot at the number one pick. So what do? They go add some low value, but good players. Anthony Davis only goes for 1.5 first round draft picks. Trae Young, just for expiring contracts. Now you bring them in and you win for the back half of the season. But then in the offseason, maybe you don't get the number one pick. Or at the end of the day, you bought super low on these guys. So just trade them again. And so now we're looking at a team that is enhancing its chance to get better by simply bringing in ringers for rent a couple of months at a time and then dumping them off so that during the stretch where it creates a benefit by being bad, that they can then be bad again. It's too easy of a loophole to get through this. It's going to be interesting to see how they do resolve some of this because I don't think it's their biggest issue either. I'm fascinated to see how expansion changes this conversation because I do think that if you spread the talent out a little bit more, it does change things even more on the dynamic of how all of this is done. You can't just stockpile. You also, depending on how revenue is split up, could benefit by being better. There's a lot to unpack in this conversation. Again, I do not have a simple fix to end tanking. I think ultimately, in a draft class like this, you're never going to get it to go away. We've seen it. I know that people point to the NFL and they say they don't tank in the NFL. They'll win a game even if it hurts their draft odds. And that's true in certain draft classes. Don't forget that when Andrew Luck was on the board, when other big name quarterbacks have come available, we've seen some bad tanking in the NFL. We've seen teams pull the ripcord to go get the number one pick. If there are enough generational prospects at the top of a draft, teams are going to do it. I think over 27 and 28, we will see far less tanking. We're already seeing teams posture towards that, with the Wizards declaring that they're going to try next year, with the Jazz loading up to try to win next year, the Nets announcing that they want to get things done in free agency over the next year. I don't see nearly as many teams in the tank race next year. And that's just part of the cycle. That's how things go in professional sports. We'll be back next week with some recruiting coverage here. We will do an episode of 5-star values, get you up to date on the latest in the 2026 recruiting class. We'll talk about some of those players who are going to become 27 NBA draft guys, as well as on this Thursday, we will have a new edition of 3 True Values right here for you. Be sure to tune in, share with a friend. However you watch the show, we appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. This has been 3 True Values Big Board. I'm your host, James Fletcher.